Welcome. This is Scott Killaby, and this is my podcast, Natural Recovery from Suffering. So I'm at work right now. Yeah, right now. Doing this podcast. And I don't want to stop working. Yeah. You know how some people want to go home? No, I'm already at home. And I'm enjoying exactly what I'm doing, and this is my work. And I don't want to do something else. And I'm not doing this as like a workaholic would, because I can check my body and I know I'm not doing it to get mom and dad's approval. I'm also not doing it to get your approval. I'm also not lying to you right now. I used to lie as a teacher because I couldn't check into my body. I didn't know I was lying because trauma's in the body. And part of what I was doing as a teacher was trying to stay safe and get love with anger repression. And so I had more stress in my job, as you can imagine, right? Much more. I mean, not a lot, but much more than now. But back then it wasn't much compared to what a lot of other people have, frankly. It's just different degrees of freedom. I hope that's clear what I'm saying. I wasn't even suffering before as a teacher. It's just like, I'll tell you what it was. It was like chronic pain. And so the pain would be bad sometimes when there was a kind of a day with a lot in there, but the mind would be somewhat quiet, mostly quiet around it. And there would be a lot of space because of just awareness, that recognition of presence. But there was still chronic pain, and I didn't understand how that was connected to my job. I mean, because I was telling myself that there was no way that it could be, that that's physical, that that's something that's just, my spine is messed up. See, I was just telling myself that. And there was an MRI that showed the pinch on the spine. But my doctor said, well, you shouldn't have that much pain. But I did, and it was affecting work, but I was bamboozling myself because I didn't know it was anger repression. And so I was still doing what I had done. I was still doing a little bit of what I had done my whole life and what I think everybody does, which is that we keep working for mom and dad until we clear them out of our bodies. And how I've come to see this is not just my own healing, but working with so many people through the years and learning to get better as a teacher. Because when they first came to me as a non-dual teacher, I would say, well, there must be some identity there. You're just believing that identity. And if you just don't believe that, then you'll be free. And of course, that's how I bypassed. Because when we look at identity, which is something like, I'm not good enough, that comes from the buried emotions in the body. And so if we do a spiritual process or a therapy on that limiting belief or that identity, we might feel better temporarily, but we didn't get to the buried emotions that create it. So it just keeps happening on some level. So real quick, there I was at work not experiencing a lot of identity. If you can understand that, I'm a non-dual teacher. I'm teaching. And so I'm not like getting stressed out and going, oh, I'm unlovable. You know, that I was sort of beyond that stage at that point. It's just chronic pain. And then a belief system that said, well, that's physical. That has nothing to do with like the fact that I'm here in this meeting, but this is what I do, but I don't really want to be here. I'd rather just go sit in silence or walk my dogs or hang out with my husband or it's just like that, just telling myself, yeah, the pain hurts and I think I just want to go relax. But the truth is I was still working for mom and dad. You guys. Yep, still doing it for you. On some level, I couldn't detect because in my experience, it was just quiet and chronic pain. But I'll tell you what, I discovered that it was buried anger. I've been mad at dad for making me to try to be responsible. That's what it was. And anytime that this teaching job felt like I needed to be responsible, fuck you, dad. But I didn't know it, and then it's just pain. Chronic pain. Buried. I don't know that I'm angry at dad. See, I don't know that I'm a teacher. In part, it's like I had to be a teacher, I had to take all my anger and put it in my pain. say it that way, and then work and try to work without sabotaging myself. But I would, because it would be like, well, I don't want to be at this meeting, but I need to be at the meeting. I do want to. This is my work. But something's telling me that I need to go do something else, or something less physical, or something, or whatever. But really, I was just angry and didn't know it, and angry at Dad still. Just chronic pain. I mean, Jesus Christ, Mom and Dad are responsible for a lot of employee lost production costs and healthcare costs, and untold amounts of suffering at work. So I kept working with people, and they kept coming to me, and I kept working with identity, and they would have some peace at work. Like, really, they would. Just like me, a lot of peace at work, even some of them. But no, they weren't really living and enjoying their job and like, yeah, this I want to do this. I'm doing what I want. And even I wasn't totally. See, people think, man, if you're a teacher, that's got to be a good gig. Well, nothing is a fucking good gig when you have repression. It's not great, because there are challenges to it. You know, teachers like me, we're busy. If you see everything that I do, and if we're not clear within ourselves, we're human. And I learned that the hard way, I guess. So my experience at work is different than the people that I was working with, you know, because they would come in with like really stressed sometimes and real deep procrastination. And frankly, I've been a pretty active teacher through the years, but there was a period of time where I could relate to them, because with the chronic pain, it's like I stopped being able to enjoy this. And that was weird for me, because I really enjoy helping people. And then it was like, it started to be a little bit like I don't enjoy it as much. And I knew something was there, you know, but if you're not tuned in, you wouldn't think of that as repression, maybe. So I just wanted to talk about that subtle stuff that I was experiencing, because some of the people that came in for me were really suffering like I used to suffer at my job as an attorney. And that's how I could relate to them, because attorneys can be like way unconscious. Because, well, like anybody in any profession, but people would come to me and they would say, you know, I'm just trying to, I want to accomplish this. I know this is my purpose. I want to do this work, this job, but it's like, I just get stressed. I know I sabotage myself. I get angry at my coworkers. I overwork when I don't want to. And I listen to that, and coming out of repression, you know, at some point I was like, yeah, that's all repression. But before I knew it in myself, I would again take them to identity. And how identity connects to this, interestingly, for me, just how I say it, is if you're at work with a deficiency story, you're working for Mom and Dad or whoever it is that hurt you when you were a kid. Essentially, that's what you're doing. And that's the sabotage, because you're not good enough. So if you're at work thinking, believing you're not good enough, it's just not what you are. But you wouldn't know that, right? And so you live it out. And because of that identity, or with that identity, comes a lot of stress. It's like you can never get what you want done. You get in your own way. It's not. See, the way I see it is, when we're really clear, we're probably doing something or headed towards something that we really want to do. And we're clear about that. And so we're not going to stress out by doing what we want to do that much, because we're getting in our own way with these stories and trauma. So just see how you're getting in your own way, maybe. Your suffering might not look like, for example, the guy that is just, guys or even women, they're just seeking endless amounts of money in cryptocurrency or some sort of investment, and they crash or something, and it stresses them out. And they come to me. They don't come to me when they're making a lot of money. I always say that to them, you know, because the trauma's running thin too. You're trying to get Mom and Dad's approval. But when they crash, it's suffering, because internally it's like, I'm not good enough, or whatever that is. And that harkens back to the trauma of childhood and not being able to be ourselves, and just do what we want as kids, and having to conform and get their love and approval and keep doing it. And as long as you're doing well, that's fine. You get the rewards from it. You get money, you get accolades. But when it crashes, you don't get to hide from it as much. The pain comes forth. And that's when people will come to me. But what I say is you don't want to treat spirituality as a remedy for just those moments when things aren't going well, because you're trying to get rid of emotions. But if you bring awareness and inquiry fully to your life, you're making the unconscious conscious with this work. You're ending the whole cycle of working for approval, for love, for safety even. And some of these guys that would come to me, and women, I just remember guys, because and maybe women can be really driven. I know a few actually, but it feels like culturally there's definitely still an emphasis, or men think that they really do have to accomplish, and if they don't, they're a failure. And actually I've met, now that I think about it, quite a few women like that. And women have an extra burden with all the sexism and the trauma in the workplace. So you have to fight all that on top of trying to get mom and dad's approval. So yeah. But I just have this one guy, that's what it is. I have one guy in my mind, and it's just really poignant. It was a long time ago. But he was successful, see, and hadn't even thought to come to me for years. He was just watching me, and he saw that I was doing work that I think scared him a little bit. So he just kept suffering. Even though he was interested in my work, he just kept suffering at work. And he finally came in, and the insights that he had were enormous, because he really saw that he was lying to himself. And that's what we do. So, and then we sabotage ourselves. Now, that we lie to ourselves by being unconscious is what I mean. We tell ourselves stories that they don't resonate or align with why we're really doing something. Because why we do most things is to stay safe, get love, survive. And that's what we're experiencing. The thoughts, the feelings at work and stress, all of that is in some way connected to, I have to stay safe and get love, which is really stay safe from the buried emotions that drive all that. And get love by holding that back. So we can't be ourselves at work in that way, and that's going to be stressful. There's going to be suffering, and there's going to be sabotage, because we can't be ourselves. And I am aware, I'm very aware of the thought that says, well, I can't just go get angry at my boss, I'll get fired. Or start crying, while I'm checking people out at Target. And that's a sign of a larger issue. I understand. See, I think employers, schools, institutions need to have safe spaces for people, because our careers are making us sick and keeping us sick. Even mine was as a teacher, because I wasn't aware of how repression was still playing on me in different ways. And so in that attempt to get mom and dad's approval, we're unconscious to, this is really serious business. These are buried emotions driving all this. But I haven't even got to that yet. I'm telling you that most of the time I just work with identity for a while. And it's like they would get a pit stop with me. This guy came in after years of not really working with me privately, and then he got such benefit, but I didn't give him the benefit at the deep level. I can't give it. But neither one of us were skillful enough to get to the root buried emotions. So he went back to work and did well for a while. But because it's trauma, the stress came back and all that. So over the years, I learned and saw the bypassing in spirituality. I just couldn't get to the root of it in myself and others. And that's the repression. Because that guy came back, thankfully, years later. And it was a totally different experience. It was beautiful. It's one of my favorite sessions because of what he saw. It was much, much deeper the second time. And he's doing a lot better now, sustainably. which is we sat down with the same issue and we looked at it from a different place because he had been watching my teaching on YouTube, and he's picking up some things about his job and what's really driving him. And he heard me talk about my own anger repression on YouTube and how it was affecting. I have to say, it wasn't a lot of stress at work. Sometimes I over-exaggerated to make a point that I'm still suffering because I'm teaching. But, I mean, because if you would see me, you would say, well, you look pretty peaceful to me, or you look fine to me. But this is anger repression, see? So chronic pain and other mild stress, not usually because I was bearing anger. It's not like as a teacher I'm going to fly off the handle. So it's going to be buried, chronic pain, mild stress, stuff that's sometimes hard to detect. But with him, that was like so many years of suffering for him. You know, the years that he came, before he came to me, working and suffering, and then the first time he came, and then there were some years between that and the second time he came, and I had developed the work more during the time between the two sessions. And he was watching just like he always does from a distance. I got his permission to do this podcast, by the way. And we had a good laugh about he's doing well now. But I developed the work and he came in and he was all smiles from the beginning, even though something at work was really getting at him. He was smiles because as soon as he got there, he was like, I think I know where this is going, but I don't know how to get there. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, when I watch you and I hear you, it's like I think I have anger repression is what it is. And I said, oh, yeah, I probably couldn't have caught that, because this whole non-dual thing is a big bypass. Sorry about that. Sorry is not enough, but it's bad. That's why I speak up so much. I don't care if people get pissed at me. It's a bypass, guys. It's dangerous. It's our health. For those who are new to this podcast, if you don't know, spiritual bypassing is just like you get on the spiritual path and you sabotage it. Say it that way. You want to be free. You want to feel and allow everything and just be a healthy, whatever, open, clear, peaceful. But then what happens is continued suffering in different ways. Even it can be chronic pain and disease because repression creates a lot of that. It's a sabotage. It's just like this guy at work. He has this intention he wants to do this job. He likes it, but then he stresses out and sabotages himself and he can't reach the objectives that he has set for himself. So this time, I took him right to the anger, but remember it's buried. So we were just working in a contraction, like a tight sense in his stomach, basically, like a tightly wound ball. We got it revved up. And he saw the anger and he brought it into awareness through this technique. And when he kept doing that, then he didn't have to focus on different areas of stress. Like he didn't have to sit and think about or question his thoughts around an employee after that. He started to learn how to go straight to the buried stuff. And then those triggers and stress just started going away. That's why I did this, because we just had a good laugh about how we kept missing a laugh and a cry, not really a cry, but I mean, it's a tragic thing to like keep missing the root of suffering. And then I'm a teacher and I'm saying, hey, I'm going to tell you about suffering. Ugh, what a sabotage. So what job are you doing? I know that you can't get angry at work. I know that our whole society is unconscious, and I do think we need to have safe spaces and help with trauma. But right now, we're so unconscious as a species, it's probably not going to happen for a while. So what I say is be the master of your own authority, meaning don't wait around and don't tell yourself things like, because the rest of the people on earth are suffering, I'm going to keep suffering. I mean, if you really think about it, you're arguing in favor of suffering. Is that the position you want to take? Around getting clear around work stuff. If that's it, I would just turn the podcast off. Why listen? It's just for entertainment. Really? If you sit and talk yourself out of it before you start, for example, I get that. I do. I talked myself out of it for a long time. You have that right. But just, okay, just take a look at. See, I like to provoke a little bit because I know people listen and they disagree and stress out and like, oh yeah, he's right or he's wrong. And if I could just speak to you a little bit and say, I totally get it. I've avoided this my whole life. So let's address the elephant in the room, though, because where we're at now, you probably work at a place where you can't get angry or cry or tell them that you're afraid, maybe. But if you take matters into your own hands and learn skills, what I learned is there's a way to do this because I was scared too. I didn't want to get angry at the people doing my work. Think about it. I'm a spiritual teacher. I had that concern. Like, what spiritual teacher can just be really, really angry and continue to have people do the work? See, that's why we don't show the anger, is to get people, well, no, we don't do it because of repression. But it works in our favor. See? So I get the fear that says, well, I can't get angry at work because that was my fear. But if I can do it, you can do it. If I can get up here as a teacher and say, fucking, I was raging my whole life, and that was part of the reason I became a teacher, and now I cleared that, I don't know. I think you can do it. Where do you start? I'll maybe say something about that in a second. But if you take matters into your own hands, and I'll tell you again what that means in a second, you start learning inquiry. And you start bringing that inquiry to your life. So you can imagine there were times when I was teaching during the anger repression work that I was angry. But what I did is I processed it. That's what I did. I didn't always come on the video and just yell, right? Because it's a spiritual practice. And plus, you don't need that. I mean, why do you need somebody yelling at you all the time? That's my stuff, right? There were times when I did put it on people because I'm just human. But a lot of the processing can just happen in your own space at home, and you can, healthy expressions of anger, like skillful work, can be done on your own. So the mind that says I can't do it or whatever is really trying to scare you. And let's talk about the situation that if I'm at work, this is my work, and I have people in front of me and I'm angry. What is it that would help me in that situation? What might help is if I could communicate about the anger, if I was conscious enough. And I could say, yeah, that right there came up because I felt this. And that's a similar thing. Or maybe it's clean anger, first of all. Maybe you're doing something in the meeting, it's really disruptive. And the only way to meet your energy is to get angry. But if I communicate about it to everybody else, and I'm clear within myself and earnest, that's okay. And by the way, it's okay if you get angry at me. But if we keep doing it, well, that might be disruptive. It would be disruptive if I stayed angry. See, because I'm not conscious. I'm identified with it. And if I'm identified with it, if it's hanging around, there's something to look at, because it could be that maybe there's something else that I've buried. I'm not opening to it. So even the anger that comes up in my meetings is perfect. We want that, but we want to process it. I think that's what makes the difference. Like, let me just talk about my work first. I've definitely gotten angry at a facilitator or two that I trained after doing the anger repression work, of course. And that was a new thing for this community to deal with. Scott Killaby getting angry? Hmm. But we live in a community where we communicate. So what I did with that facilitator is I went and said, this is why I was angry. I think that what I'm saying has validity, what I'm saying to you, but the way that I delivered it is because I held it in a little bit for a few days. And I said that to her, and it was truthful. And because it was truthful, I think it landed on her and helped her process it. And I think that, a lot of humans really are open if you're open. And the ones that aren't, is that a job that you want? If you can't be real at all, is that really going to be your job anyway? So I just started looking for the humans that could be real. And, some can't, and some won't process, for sure. But what you do when you do this work is you start creating a life for yourself that is more in alignment with what you really are, who you are, as you do this work. Because a lot of what we're doing is like being fake and then suffering because we're having relationships and being at jobs that we don't like and don't want, or that aren't satisfying, but we don't have the empowerment yet to do something different, or the clarity. So I'm trying to express something that's difficult, and I'm going to give you another segment on this, because I think the fears are valid. The fear, like, I can't get angry at my mom, for example. She's 80 years old, Scott. I'm taking care of her. She's going to die soon. I know that anger is my repression. I know that I would benefit from this work. I'm not going to get angry at mom. Let me address that. Well, before I get into, hey, Scott, I'm not going to get angry at my boss, I need to go back. For anybody who was confused about the scenario of the person that I worked with and my own scenario at work as a teacher, because I think I took for granted that maybe you understand how that repression works and how it plays into problems at work. Let me see if I can just explain it again in case you didn't get it. When we're kids, if I like to use anger because that's my repression, I have that experience, but it could be sadness or hurt or other emotion, fear. It just isn't safe to express that in our families or at school. You may or may not remember that because repression just buries the emotion without you knowing it. This is how your personality, your ego structure gets developed. You don't know it. If you knew it, you couldn't have become the person that you, if you could be angry, you wouldn't be the person that you think you are today. You'd have a different experience of yourself. But you couldn't. Or you couldn't open to the sadness or the hurt. And so because of that, you just couldn't be yourself. Just sit with that for a second, even if you don't remember it. If we have to hold back what's true for us, we're forced to identify with what's false. So somewhere along the way, because you couldn't open to sadness or hurt or anger, I'm just going to say anger because my client, we are both anger repressors. And for me, I had to hold back anger and then identify with, I have to be good. You can imagine how that applies to work, right? I have to be good as a teacher. Peaceful. See how it played into my job? I went to get a job where I could be good and peaceful. Hide from the anger. So he found a job where he could be, well, his story was, I'm not good enough. He got that from dad, but how did he get that? Because he couldn't open to anger when he was a kid. And what came up for him as an identity was, I'm not good enough. And then that identity has been working ever since then. And he too found, I have to be good. See? So he's working to try to be good. That's what we're doing. That's why we're suffering at work. Because we're trying to be something that we're not. We're not being ourselves. And we have these work environments in which it really feels like those are the rules. You can't. Like a re-traumatization of childhood, in a way. It is. We're not a conscious enough species to have work environments that are conscious, in which there are safe spaces and the bosses are conscious and are aware of their own patterns. And so there's just trauma at the workplace, showing up as all kinds of stuff. I mean, God, the list would be endless. The suffering at work, there. The emotional suffering, stress, and dissatisfaction at work. So, but some people with trauma experience work as not just stressful, they might even experience it as like they love it, but they're not checking into their bodies. And so there are many people that I've worked with who for a long time, they just kept going out into the world, not processing stuff, and just running on what they got from it. Because when we identify with what's false, we're getting something out of that. We're burying those emotions, keeping them buried, staying safe, and getting love and approval. So that's like a fuel. Safety is like, yes. And approval is like, yes, right? We want that. And if we get busy, that sort of satisfies the deficiency story. Well, not really, but we think it does, right? If I do things in the world that are good, or if I achieve things, then it doesn't feel like there's anything wrong with me, maybe for a moment. I feel good. I get a hit of chemicals in the brain, right? But then because the suffering's under that, I got to go get it again. And again and again and again. And those are those folks who are just going, they look like they're doing really well sometimes, but they're operating on, if they went back to childhood, it's the same thing as my client, basically. And on the surface, it looks like you're doing well. Well, my client was suffering more. That's the point I wanted to make. With this other scenario, let's say somebody doesn't even think they're really suffering. They're just achieving and enjoying it. Well, that can crash, though, is what I'm saying. Because it's trauma. You can't sustain it. You can't fill that hole. There's no hole. There's emotional repression. You're trying to feel good about yourself, but there's nothing wrong with you. You just buried emotions to stay safe, and now you're just seeking safety in the world and love because of that. And I'm not saying that to diminish it. I'm just saying to point it out or to blame you for it. But if you feel blamed, then there you go. That probably makes you feel bad, and that fuels it back up. So I'll prove him right or wrong. When you go to the root, it's clear. When you don't, it's cloudy. It's like, what is he talking about? Is this true? But look, don't believe me. You really shouldn't. You should check in your own body and see. I'm so happy now that I get to do this. I don't even want to call it a job, because now I get to do what I wanted to do. I'm not sabotaging it, right? I was sabotaging it by repressing anger because I wasn't showing up being myself, and I was still suffering chronic pain and some stress here and there and work stuff. But not now. Because now I've learned that if there's any sensation in the body, you don't ever want to get rid of that. You want to make the unconsciousness there conscious. And when you do that, it goes away, but it doesn't do that by trying to stuff it back down or distract. And so that's why I don't use work to distract anymore. Because I'm in my body, I'm aware in my body. And if something were to come up, stress, tension, even chronic pain, I know now that, oh, that's great. That's telling me right there that there's some unconsciousness there and that I might be doing work from that. And so the body, it keeps the score on the trauma. It becomes the teacher in a way. And it just shows me, oh, you have something there to look at. And unless you want to suffer at work, look at it. But the good thing is that it's not trying to get rid of things, because that's what we're doing before we get here, is we're trying to bury the stuff. We're working, we don't want to feel stuff. trying to keep that down. Here we open to that and we use that so that our work is our life. And I think that then, okay, so what's going to happen then if you do the work? Well, if you do the work and you're working, see, your mind might tell you, well, I can't do it because I need my job. And then you're safe and you suffer. But what I'm saying is, if you become the master of your own experience, and when you're triggered at work or stressed, you learn how to pull away and do the work, you're going to start speaking differently and reacting and responding differently at work. If you experience, like for anger repressors, if you do it and you start to feel that anger, you're going to learn how to see that and see what you're believing with it now that you can finally feel it. You're going to let it come through fully. And sometimes you are going to get angry at work. You're only human. Can't you see your coworkers getting upset sometimes? Or your boss? What you're concerned with maybe is either sadness repressors like crying or being hurt by everything at work. That's not my repression exactly. I've always been able to process hurt. But maybe that's what you're worried about if you bury it. But you won't. See, that's your fear of hurt talking. That's the programming. That just tells you I'm afraid of doing that. But the actual experience of being clear or clearing stuff while you're working is helpful. It actually shows you where your suffering is, and it shows you how the freedom is right there with it. So you don't want to let your trauma be your teacher here. Just let me talk to you and see if I can invite you into looking instead of you just sitting there talking yourself out of it. And for that, we have inquiries. That's where I would go if I were you. Go straight there, because the mind here will just take us to safety. If we're not in our bodies, in other words, conscious there. So I want to just round this out because I want to deal with that fear, though. Because still, your conditioning is still going to keep you safe. So it might say, well, I'm not going to go be hurt at work. You know, can you imagine like a nurse or a doctor at a hospital and the doctor orders something or says something, oh, that hurts, doctor. Can't believe you said that. Well, you know what? A little bit of that, or maybe some more of that at work might be good, actually, because it might help people understand that the way that they're acting and stuff has an impact on people. Well, I'll let you decide that. But what if instead, as you start to come out of the hurt or sadness repression, you learn to pull away and open to it and feel safer with it first? And then if you process it more within yourself, because you can't do it around people anyway, the processing, what I think you might find, including anger repressors who process their anger, step aside and do that, I think you're going to just speak differently and respond differently at work. That's what I noticed. So it's like this. If previously, if I had a full schedule and someone said, hey, a friend of mine even, can I work with you after you're done with everybody? I might have said, sure. Because I wasn't seeing that my chronic pain was capturing anger. And so I didn't even know that saying sure was a trauma response. Because I wasn't connected to my body. I had chronic pain. I was actually not conscious in a part of my body. And so after healing that now, hey, can I work with you after all those sessions? No. And so, see, I'm not getting angry, but I had to process, see, because I had anger buried. And what I first wanted to say with the buried anger was, no, I'll help you. Sure, I'll help you. Yeah, come, I'll do that. I helped everybody else, I'll help you. That's repression. Because you're not checking into your body. You're just overextending, people pleasing. That's the anger repressor too. It's unconscious. But, and well, in inquiry, what finally came up was not in person necessarily, but in inquiry, if that scenario came up, it might be, fuck no, I don't want you to do that. No, I don't want to fucking help you. I'm fucking angry, but I can't express it. And that moves energy when you do it skillfully, not in front of them. That's your mind scaring you. you process throughout your life so that you show up differently. And you might then say it. You might say it. You might start speaking at work. For those anger repressors who don't say much, you might just say something like, you know what? I have a lot on my plate right now, and I was going to talk to you about that. Right now, I'd rather not have another project. See how that lands. But you'll be coming from a different place. It's not the conditioning that you have now doing that. This work changes your response to life. So it's a different energy. So your mind that says, I can't do that, it's right. Your conditioning right now probably can't. That's why it's scaring you. But as you do work, it's a different experience. Do this work. And you start speaking more. Or the sadness repressor might not just start crying at work. Might happen though. But could be processing like at night something around work and go into first maybe anger because it's safer or something, or finally get to the hurt of like not getting the promotion. You know, during the day they might act tough and everything's fine. Like, yeah, I didn't really want that, anyway. But at night they're finding, oh man, that hurts. God, I've worked so hard for this company. And a real, authentic opening to that skillfully. And then you go back the next day and you're not trying to be different. We don't try to be different here. And if we do, we know that's the trauma. We're trying to stay safe again in some way. We just show up, open, being ourselves and open to processing. And can you imagine then, though, instead of just crying everywhere, you might say something like to the boss, I want to let you know that affected me when I didn't get the promotion. I've worked a long time for the company, and I just wanted to tell you that had a really big, almost like a personal impact in my life, really. It's not just professional, like, my wife and everything. So you might tell them how you feel. You were impacted. You have the right to tell other people how their actions impacted you, or you perceive that. But with repression, we don't think we have the right to be ourselves, even at work. And if we keep believing that, we stay at jobs and we suffer. So I say, do the work. Don't just stay at a job and suffer. Stay at a job, but bring some inquiry in now and then. Start noticing changes. See if you can handle those changes. Maybe you like speaking up a little bit more. Maybe it makes you feel a little bit more empowered, but maybe sometimes you feel like you're kind of an asshole, or maybe you go too far in expressing your hurt or something. That's fine. You just process that and you just step into yourself more and more each day. And you might find, oh shit, I don't want to be here. Yeah, people find that. We anger repressors, we find out we have these relationships in which we've been inviting people into a relationship, but we don't really like them. Some of them. But we're people pleasers. So we pretend to like them, and when they do something that we don't like, we can't express the anger. So we get triggered, but we don't express it. And then we invite them over again. Do that again and again. Unconsciously creating our suffering like that. And we do the same kinds of things at work. When we don't speak up, we keep being at a job that just doesn't do it. So there's something wrong here. But it's not me. If we're not conscious, we'll be like that. It's just the job. It has nothing to do with me. If this would change and my fucking boss, I get that a lot of the time with my spirit. It's like, God damn it, Scott. They won't say it to me if they're anger repressors, but if you would only do this, or they'll think that, quietly. And you know what? I probably am doing something. I don't know. I'm just a human. Who knows? Maybe I forgot a meeting or I did something. But you see, if you sit there and do that at work, by the way, you have every right and you should know how you feel about your work. That's what I say to people. I wouldn't just bring mindfulness in where you're just trying to stuff down any thoughts or anything like that. I would go into the body and really find out in inquiry how you think and feel about this job and what it is you really want. And that's hard to know when you have trauma, because when we have trauma, all we really want is to stay safe and get love. But it's buried, so we don't know that, and this is why we're suffering. I mean, obviously, if we lived in a world in which everyone was clear of this, the employment would be very different. It would just look, I'm sure, totally different. I mean, yes. I mean, some of the countries in Europe, I think they get it, where they give longer lunch breaks and just things that they recognize the human life and personal life and feelings, and that people struggle after the birth of a child. And they need that time to bond with the child, all these things that we're just starting to do, but I don't think we get it fully yet, how much we are creating suffering by just how we do work, just as a society. And of course the money thing, and that goes with it too, but that's that's another podcast, right? Well, thank you for listening to me ramble about my wonderful job and jobs and careers and work. So check me out at Kilby.com. See y'all.